Okay. So two gents coming on stage, please. One is Gideon from Make It IT in Africa. Make IT in Africa is a tech entrepreneurship initiative. And after that, or at the same time, Ray Buckman from Airbus Biz Lab.
Mr. First. So, first I would like to build up on the story that we heard for the introduction today. 12 years ago in Nairobi, Walter Seibel from the GSZ also met a young entrepreneur who didn't have access to necessary partners or the ecosystem. And I guess we agree when we say that we came, it's the switching itself, that we came already a long way and that a lot happened in the ecosystem. Is this open, I think, Moses? It's just switching on the... Anyway, Make IT in Africa is commissioned by the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development and aims to support a collaborative, open, rising ecosystem in Africa by access to markets, access to capital, and access to skills, which would ultimately lead to startup growth, self-employment, and in the second step also to more jobs in Africa. Make IT is operative since 2017 in Kenya, Nigeria, but also with an outreach to other countries in East and West Africa, and most likely also will get an extension to Tunisia, Ghana, and Rwanda. And currently we are supporting 110 startups in 11 countries with our measures. One of our key measures is the Make IT Accelerator, which has 3 components, which are capacity for growth, cooperation readiness, and investor readiness. So the first component basically builds on capacity building for the startups. The second one, cooperation readiness, also includes B2B exposure for startups, and we are happy also to say that we invited 5 startups that would showcase tonight and pitch during the startup pitching night. And in the third phase, investment readiness, I think you all saw the panel before with Anton from Allied Crowds, where you also received the investor guides that are successfully being launched this year. And we'd like to build up on such cooperations for the future as well, because sometimes there are a lot of things that we from Make IT could offer, but there are also things that we cannot offer, while there are other partners also in the ecosystem that maybe can offer things that we have, but they don't have, and so on. So that's why we also would like to come together more closely with other industry partners to contribute to a sustainable ecosystem on the ground, especially with industry partners that have certain expertise in certain sectors, because that's what startups really need, because they maybe miss the sector-specific approach on the ground. And now I'd like to invite Ray.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Hi everyone. I was already thinking, what would I say if it doesn't work? Thank you very much. Before I start, I actually want to tell an anecdote, and I don't want to offend anyone with this anecdote, and also be aware that I tell the same anecdote actually inside our company. So about 2.5 years ago, one of my colleagues actually was part of the startup called the Africa Plateau. So a group of people that started to think about the strategy for Airbus in Africa. And one of her name is Susan, and she asked actually one of the plateau leaders, so how many non-European, non-male, young, and non-white actually participate in this discussion? I don't tell you the number, but it's not so many. Okay? And I think this is the whole starting point, and also the whole journey that I will be taking you through, and the learning actually that we went through. My name is Ray Buckman, and I'm leading the Airbus Biz Lab campus in Hamburg. Airbus BizLab is a hybrid model, the corporate accelerator. On the one hand, we have startups, and on the other hand, we have internal innovation projects. We've been doing this for 3 years now. And then always the question is, what is the impact that we create on the business? 19.5. 19.5 million euros have been invested by venture capitalists and business angels into the startups after they have left the program. And it's actually a key figure, I would say, to measure the success of an accelerator. Are the startups able to attract funding afterwards? Is it a startup that can not only work in a single market, single product, single customer relationship, but actually is able to scale the business? The other number is important for us, 42%. Because at the end, Airbus doesn't care so much how much money is invested into the startup. This is a number that you care about. But Airbus cares about, do we find new partners? Do we find new corporations within our fields of interest? And then I do not talk too much about the internal project because that's not really the audience, but if you want to know more also about that process of how do internal innovations take off, please do approach me. What I would like to say at this moment though, and it's really important, is that by mixing up internal innovation and external innovation and not making any difference between the two, this is where we think where the real impact actually comes from. Because the startups and the internal projects, they sit in the same accelerator, they go through the same processes, and they get exposed to the same elements. This is really what creates for us these good numbers. We've been doing this for 3 years now. We have just finished the boot camp in Hamburg for the season 4. And we've been doing this at 3 locations so far, Hamburg, Toulouse, and Bangalore. And we're adding this year the 4th location, Madrid. Now, we are here at Afrolynk. How many Africans have participated to this program? How many have applied to this program? Not so many. And also the important question for us, if we think about the partnerships, if we think about an accelerator that is working with the African continent, we have to think differently about this model, because the hybrid model only works where there's an Airbus facility. There's no Airbus facility and no development teams in Africa. So we have to think about partnerships. It is actually where I'm kicking in what Gideon has left the stage with. But we have, and also, and this I think really important also to share from a corporate perspective, because actually with the BizLab approach, and we kind of try to also learn for ourselves how to actually run it. The BizLab itself is a startup, so you have to prototype and you have to try different things. And we have 2 things actually in terms of learning that we need to go through. So the first one, and I talked about it last year when I was here at Afrolynk. I was saying that we're about to do something, and let's see what we will learn from it. So I will share some of these learnings in a second. But one thing that we also find out, and I didn't talk too much about it last year when I was here, but actually it turned out to be really, really important. This journey, as we have to learn how does our program actually work with an African ecosystem, with African partners. The big element is how do you bring the people that I mentioned before that are designing the Africa strategy with you on that journey, because for them it's a foreign object, it's something alien, they are not so familiar with it. Actually, I'm really having some conflicting, struggling discussions with our ventures team and with others about the perception of the market. And by this, also I went to some, for me as well, it was also interesting to learn what is my own perception in terms of what are the types of technology that I would be looking for, I would be finding in Africa. These are the 2 learnings. What do we do as a program, and how do we take the organization with us, that also in the organization this learning happens and that we get exposure to the Airbus people also towards these startups, these technologies and these new innovations. So what have we been doing last year? First of all, 2017 we did a first call, and I will show you 4 startups. So we have scouted or looked at around 50 startups. Out of this we came to 5 that we closely followed, but I will only present 4 of them here. One of them, Track Your Build. Actually was introduced to me by a gentleman here, Walkery, last year after I was on the panel. And he was like, oh, you need to meet this startup, really cool, from Sierra Leone, they're doing great stuff, they do aerial observation, and they could be good for the program. And actually Edmund, the CEO, he came all the way to Kenya, from Sierra Leone to Kenya, just to meet us when we were on our tour meeting some of the startups. And now he has been mentored with one of our business units. He's about to raise a bigger fund soon. He's actually in the fundraising right now. We helped him to get into the GIZ Bank IT Accelerator, and also one of our business units is in discussions with him. Aerial Industries. It's a startup from Nigeria. They do crop spraying with drones. This startup actually came into our program. This is where we tested. What if an African startup goes into a program in Europe, in that case in Hamburg? And he wanted, why did it make sense? Because he wanted to build his own drone. Well, one of the things he learned, it's not a good time to build a drone by himself, because he actually found two things. One, if he builds it in Europe and if he builds it in Hamburg, it's too expensive for his use case. So we said, okay, then we stopped the program here. You go back to Lagos and you try it there. And then he was in Lagos, and after 1 or 2 months also he said, also I can't build a drone here because actually the ecosystem is not ready for me to build the drone locally. We said, okay, so what do you do then? And then he pivoted actually, and he came back to something that we started with him at the very beginning. We said, why don't you first start as a service model, and later on try to develop drones also locally when the ecosystem is also more ready. So now, just last month, he signed his first MOU, his first Memorandum of Understanding, with one of his first clients. Third, Cloudline. Cloudline was a startup that is from South Africa, and they use an airship to transport large cargoes. That's their vision. It's a very big vision. Big cargo loads, long distances. It must be cargo loads that can travel slow, but that are very heavy. And that was a vision. He didn't have a product. He had a great team, but he didn't have a product. So by coming to Munich and meeting some of the experts that are themselves also working on an airship, he actually was able to convince them that they should give him their own prototype. And why would they do that? Why would they give him their own prototype? Or an additional prototype? Because actually, in order to test drones or autonomous objects, you need flying hours. Okay, so they gave him this prototype, and he will be showcasing it at the South African Innovation Summit in 2 weeks, where he will be flying around with that prototype, and he's testing it all around the country, where he's starting to understand how does an airship actually behave. And all of this, he will learn a lot about airship behaviors. He puts small cargo loads on them, so that later on he's able to develop the full cargo load aircraft. And let's see what is the journey that we will be also going with him on that. Then we have LifeBank. LifeBank is also a startup that is part of the Make IT 100 that were shown before. And we met them at an event from the Bundesministerium für Wirtschaft und Innovation. I can't remember the English word for it, but the Ministry for Economy, right? So, and they did a startup night, and actually that's where we met that startup. And at the same time, we did an innovation event with Endeavor, the Inclusive Innovation for 2030. And one of the cases was, and that's a case that is more known in terms of drone delivery, it's delivering critical healthcare with drones. And there are some famous examples out there. And this startup, LifeBank, actually bootstrapped their way into the market in Lagos using motorbikes for drone delivery. So what we wanted to know, and they wanted themselves to expand to more rural areas and using drones. This was on their own timeline. And we said, okay, we can accelerate that timeline if we partner together and if we collaborate on it together. And by that, actually learning the difference and making the business case between a motorbike, a truck, and a drone. And this is for us, again, learning, understanding the markets also better. So these are 4 cases of real collaboration between our, again, internal innovation aspirations to develop new markets, to understand technologies better, and on the other hand, startups that want to make business at the end. This was all done with an unstructured process. This was experimenting, trying to just drop the note, we do something, Aero Mobility Africa, who's out there who wants to do something with us, and this is the outcome of it. And we take something for granted all the times in our accelerator that we run in the European locations, that there's an ecosystem around it to develop those startups. And this is why we like the approach of GIZ's Make IT Accelerator so much, because actually they develop those ecosystems and they support the development of local tech hubs, of local communities, of local innovation hubs. And we can build on that if we give the direction of these are the technologies we would like to see going forward. And we offer this collaboration, obviously for us also to make business in the future, but also for the startups to grow. And I want to end on this part, because I don't want to talk too much about it actually, is that's what we have been now formalizing also in an agreement with the GIZ Make IT in Africa Accelerator, a joint acceleration program. At this moment we are looking for the implementation partner, and we are quite confident that we will launch the call beginning of October, so that we can onboard the teams by December, and then next year in June the objective is to show at the International Paris Air Show the next phase of collaboration. I will partner with the panel, so if you want my contact details, they are on the side. So just to close up, and this is I think, I hope what the story has showed you is that for me personally, it was really, really important to change the narrative of inclusive innovation within our company. And by taking a humble approach and first starting to say, what do we actually need to learn for ourselves in order to enable us to be able to collaborate with African startups in Africa, but startups, entrepreneurs who want to make business in Africa, was really important for us. Happy for the questions in the panel.